Hello, everybody. It's Michael D. Nato again. We've got another reading from my book series. Today's reading is special. It's a released August 1st, Tales of Lithanol. It's an anthology of short stories from around the world. And I have the blessed gratitude of having two readers with me today that actually inspired the fairies in my novels to begin with. Gwen and Lexi here. I wrote them a short story years ago and actually used the characters from that in my books. They are the inspiration for my fairies, the names, the attitudes, the speech, the fun-loving, caring, everything. That's these two right there. Today we're going to be reading Chasing the Darkness from basically when Karsus meets the fairies. Not the whole thing, just a short excerpt. Which they should find familiar and have fun with. So without further ado, Chapter 6, To the Rescue. Lurian was young for a fairy, over 50 winters this year, but she knew that this was the year everyone would be watching her. She was a little over 4 feet tall, with pale skin and bright eyes. Her long blonde hair sparkled next to her transparent wings, and she always had a bounce to her step. Lurian loved to giggle and flutter through the branches on a warm spring day, but all of that would be gone soon. Her mother, Ireland, Queen of the Fairies, had told her that she would be leaving for Twilight soon. Lurian would have to rule the Council of Trees and be in charge of and protect all of their people. There were nymphs and sprites, dryads, chorids, satyrs, pixies, brownies, kelpies, nixon, selkies, and sylphs, and there were many different types of each of those as well. All of the fairies made up the Council of Trees, and they would all bow to her. She sighed and swatted another branch out of her way. She didn't want to be trapped on some dusty throne. Lurian only wanted to flitter and fly around and sing her songs to the birds. The day that her mother told her, she grabbed her slim sword, packed a few tiny wooden figurines, and flew away. She knew that the other fae would be fine. They would call out to the goddess Syl, who would protect them while she flew away and had fun.
Then why do I feel so lousy?
She thought to herself. It had been 2 days since she had left, and her mood had only gotten worse. Then the sound of crying came on the wisps of the breeze. Flying over a small pond, she followed the sound of weeping to a small bush. Lurian peered inside and saw a tiny sylph caught in some barbed vines. Taking out her sword, she cut the vines and watched the fairy fly away in haste.
Wait,
Lurian called out as the sylph hesitated and turned to her, as if waiting for a reason.
why in such a hurry, little one?
Lurian asked as she flew up, sheathing her sword.
Haven't heard yet.
The fairy sputtered so fast that Lurian could barely understand her.
We must save the princess, she's missing.
The sylph flew off in a rush and almost ran into at least 3 more tangles. Lurian never even caught her name. Curious now as to what this little fairy was saying, she only made out a little bit of the words, and princess was one of them. She flew back the way the fairy must have come, retracing the trail of broken branches and debris. It took a turn of the sun before she arrived. What she saw took the wind from her wings. Western reaches, the hidden vale. Liana the sylph, that had been caught, was a tiny fairy with gossamer wings, curly hair, and a ton of energy. She was flying through the forest after being released from that horrible tangle and was searching for the missing princess. Her queen had told them to go find her, and Liana couldn't go fast enough. She loved quests. She paused as she heard a strange noise coming from the tree line. Curiosity got the best of her, as it always did, and she flitted over to see what could be making the noise. She peeked out from behind her little tree, and her little eyes widened. A unicorn! Liana couldn't contain herself, like she ever could.
Oh my goddess, look at you.
She flew out and circled the great creature's head 4 times before slowing down to really look at him. He was huge, and also stuck in a huge pile of mud, slowly sinking.
Uh-oh, how'd you get there? Oh, yeah, you can't talk. That's okay, I'll talk for both of us.
She giggled a bit and landed on his back, petting his mane and humming a tune.
Where is that tune from? I can't remember. Was it?
Little one, focus, please. Liana jumped, beating her little wings and looking everywhere at once. She had heard that in her head and didn't know what it was. Calm down, little one, the voice said once more. It is I, the unicorn. My name is Avron, and I need your help. His voice sounded just like she imagined a unicorn would sound like. Rainbows and candy.
Hello, Avrin. Hey, the queen told us to look for you too.
she said, then frowned.
Wait, what can I do? I'm just a little thing.
She circled his head again, landing once more on his back.
Oh, I know. You're stuck. I'll help you get out, then we can... Then what? Oh well, we'll figure that out later.
She flew straight up into the branches and looked around to see what was near them.
Aha! Vines!
She started tugging on the many vines, really wishing she had a slim sword like most other fairies, but she wasn't big enough. What is your name, little one, so that I may address you? Avrin tested the strength of the quicksand he was sinking in again, just slightly, and it still held him tightly. He didn't like to let others know that unicorns could get trapped so easily, but he could not fail. He looked up to see the little sylph struggling with the vines and shook his head. He hadn't seen those, and now he felt silly.
My name? Me? Oh, I'm Liana, and these are hard to move.
With a snap, the vines gave way and coiled around Avrin's head.
Ha! I did it.
She flew down and started wrapping the end of the vine around the great unicorn's neck.
Now, I'll tie it to a tree branch way up there.
She sped off like a shot and looped the vine around a big branch and zipped back down, stuffing the vine into Avrin's mouth.
And poof! Just pull.
She zipped around in a circle, proud of herself, and laughed happily, dancing from sunbeam to sunbeam.
Why do you get stuck in the mud anyway?
Avrin pulled hard, feeling the vines tighten around his powerful neck. With the vines holding him up, he could pull his legs free one at a time. I was searching for the missing princess when I came upon a dark energy. I tried to stop this foul being, but not before the darkness drifted off into the forest. With 2 legs out, Avrin climbed the rest of the way out of the quicksand and pranced a bit, getting the feeling back into his legs. He neighed loudly, rearing up and stomping to get most of the mud from his hooves. Now, Liana, bravest of the sylphs, we must ride to save the queen.
Me?
Liana's face lit up at being called brave.
I'm going to ride a unicorn?
She yelled, then took a deep breath. It didn't really help.
I'm coming hard, let's go.
She flew onto him, kicked her little feet into the side of his neck, doing absolutely nothing except to make Avrin smile. Avrin neighed and took off, galloping in the direction that he saw the ancient darkness drift off into. He had never seen anything so evil. It was like the very essence of hatred and pain. After galloping for a full turn of the sun, following the trail of cold, lifeless fairies discarded on the unforgiving ground, Avrin could see it. As if it was aware of him, the coil of darkness sped up. Hold on, Liana. I'm going to teleport to catch it. He could only do this once every day, and he had to wait until now since he had used his power already before getting stuck. It couldn't have come back at a better time. He gathered his energy and poof, he was ahead of the dark thing. He lowered his horn and pierced the tendrils of darkness, but to no avail. It kept flowing right around him, dragging at his very soul as it did. Avrin danced away before any true harm could be done, almost hearing something like a whisper, a beckoning evil within the tendrils.
Avrin, look at it go right around the trees. Why doesn't it just go through them?
Liana asked. She grabbed a dead branch and snapped it off, flying at the darkness, curiosity written on her tiny face. She stabbed at the flowing tendrils with her improvised sword, and it wailed in agony, like some sort of tortured soul. In the blink of an eye, tendrils lashed out and smacked the little fairy, sending her flying head over heels back to Avrin. The unicorn caught her in his teeth and flung her behind him. The darkness sped up even faster, shooting away through the forest towards the court. Avrin could sense that it wanted to consume him, yet it wanted something else first. He felt the touch of dread creep along his spine. The queen! Liana, grab bark as we pass the trees and wrap my horn with it. We've got to catch it before it reaches the queen. She did what he asked, and every time they passed a tree, a tiny little fairy reached out and snatched some bark, molding it to the shape of his horn carefully and tying it with scraps of vine. They had been chasing it for so long that she lost track of time. Then they heard the collective gasp as the darkness reached the court. Avrin neighed out a challenge throughout the forest, a challenge of courage and hope. Council of Trees in the Hidden Vale. Lurian started into the clearing of the Council of Trees. There, at the foot of the Queen's throne, were hundreds of fairies, all of whom were listening to her every word. The queen was standing, addressing as the fairies with a serious look on her face.
And finally, the fate of Averin the unicorn is still unknown. He is left to find the princess 2 days ago and has not been back since. I fear him lost.
A collective gasp ran through the many fairies. Ireland raised her hands, calling for quiet once more.
I have to believe that the dark wizard Karsus looks for is the cause. We must find my daughter and Averin.
The queen broke then, sobbing quietly while trying to keep her composure, and finally sat down heavily with a wave of her hand to dismiss the fairies. Lurian was ashamed. She never thought that her mother would miss her that much, nor imagined that all those fairies would care enough to find her. And Averin? Missing? She couldn't take it. Lurian flew out in a rush and embraced her mother, crying.
I'm so sorry, Mother. I flew away. I wasn't captured or anything. It's all my fault. I never meant to hurt anyone.
Before anything else could be said, a gasp went through the crowd as a darkness came rushing into the court. A being made of dark tendrils and horror incarnate rose up and flew at the queen with a hunger that all in attendance could feel in their bones. Lurian was terrified. As it drew near, the queen spun to shield her daughter, drawing her own sword.
Face me, darkness unnamed, for thou shalt have no power in this glade.
Ireland shouted above the growing tumult of the panicked fairies. The being rose in eerie quiet, the fairies stunned silent, waiting for the dreadful outcome. The queen looked ready to die for her people, and somehow it seemed one of those perfect moments. Yet, on the wings of hope, came a neighing over the leaves, a charge of courage and love. Averin crashed into the court as debris flew from his mud-stained coat. A tiny fairy hung from Averin's long mane.
Use wood, my queen. It is harmed by wood.
She shouted, her tiny voice echoing above the quiet of the terrified fairies. Averin slammed into the darkness, and Lurian saw that his horn had been covered in bark. The thing wailed and writhed, trying to escape the horn, but the unicorn danced after it. The fairy princess, terror forgotten in the face of courage, spun and grabbed a staff from Panalis, the satyr, and leapt out at the tendrils, writhing in front of her mother. Lurian swung the staff down in perfect timing, the unicorn's horn piercing the creature once more, slashing through the darkness and leaving a great wound. She stood there, gasping as the darkness wailed, slowly melting into the air. Lurian, with her now blackened staff. Having protected her people, she finally understood that such responsibility was never a burden, but instead a privilege. She smiled at the gathered fairies and watched as they slowly went down to one knee. Her confusion turned to a knowing smile as she felt her mother place the crown of leaves upon her head from behind. And that is chapter 6 of the story, Chasing the Darkness. I absolutely love that little story, and anybody that loves fantasy, role-playing, gaming, or anything like that, high fantasy, it's just one of those perfect moments that, I don't know, it came together really well. And these two girls read the parts perfectly. I mean, you guys embodied the fairies anyway to begin with. Literally, when I wrote the book, I was thinking about how you guys just were. It's kind of nice. And I thank both of you for enjoying the reading here with me today and helping me promote my new book. If anybody doesn't realize, if you look through any of my books, usually you'll see these two's names in the very beginning under the acknowledgements. And I thank everybody here for listening to us read today, and I hope we see you in further readings. Say goodbye, girls. Thanks, guys, and have a good time.